Sure, yeah. All right, everybody ready? Okay, well, thank you all for being here today. We are excited to give you an update on the work that we're doing to increase public safety downtown and certainly citywide. With me today are Police Chief Craig Meidl and the Downtown Spokane Precinct Captain Dave Singley. It has been 3 months since we transitioned to a new police staffing model to put more officers on patrol in neighborhoods and to double the amount of officers assigned to downtown. And Chief Meidl will provide more details on that staffing model in just a minute. But since the transition, the Spokane Police Department has seen some very encouraging early progress as a result of the additional officers in neighborhoods, also some strategic allocations of resources within the department, and the outstanding work of the men and the women in SPD. That progress includes quick arrests of numerous juveniles who have been behind much of the violence and the disruption to families, employees, our businesses, and visitors trying to enjoy the downtown area recently. It also includes a nearly 60% reduction in vehicle prowlings during the first quarter of this year compared to the same time last year. The Spokane Police Department is sending a very clear message that the violence in violation of personal property comes with consequences. Just 2 days ago, officers arrested 3 individuals in their mid-teens for a stabbing. There are indications that those individuals have involvement in other menacing behavior, and the investigation into that work continues. Officers have also charged 11 other individuals related to 3 other violent incidents over the past 2 weeks and are still investigating other individuals as well. As you will hear, while each of these individuals have been charged for their parts in the 4 incidents, there are some indications that they are also connected to other illegal actions, and investigators are continuing to evaluate possible additional charges against them. Those arrested to date range in age as young as 14 years old to 24. Those arrested in connection to Tuesday's violence, 1 14-year-old and 2 16-year-olds. The young ages of these individuals alone is extremely concerning, let alone the charges. Felony assault, first-degree robbery. The presence of guns, knives, and other weapons in many of these incidents is a big reason why we established a violent crimes task force just last summer. The Violent Crimes Task Force has made 20 felony arrests, executed 13 search warrants, seized $15,000 in cash, and 11 firearms citywide just since the beginning of this year. That includes the arrest of 4 juveniles who were involved in felony assaults downtown. The task force has made more than 6 dozen arrests of violent offenders since becoming operational in June for crimes ranging from drive-by shootings, first-degree assault, and even murder. These are often larger, more complicated cases that qualify for much more significant prison terms to keep prolific and violent offenders out of our neighborhoods and out of our community. All of the arrests and the continuing investigations are the result of fantastic police work. These are encouraging signs that that work is paying off. We are in continuous communication with our neighbors as the mayor's office and the police department, and they're sharing information about what they are seeing and experiencing, and their very clear expectations for increasing public interventions. Many of their concerns are about the juveniles roaming downtown, committing crime and disturbances. These early results are just the beginning of what will be the continued outstanding work by SPD and its partners in law enforcement as the community continues to work together for the health and safety of our city. And now I would like to invite the chief to talk about the staffing changes and the strategy behind the approach that is putting more officers in our neighborhoods. Chief.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Just give a quick overview of our patrol reorganization that we implemented in January 8th. You've heard the mayor mention that as well. One of the things we realized is that we need more officers on the street. Every time an officer retires or moves on, it takes about a year to fill that position. So starting January 8th, we pulled more patrol officers back into patrol to help with the call load and help create the kind of safe community we all want to live in. Along with that patrol reconfiguration, we doubled the number of officers that we assigned downtown and extended their hours into the early morning of each and every day. Preventing these types of crimes that we're here talking about today, and you're going to hear more examples from Captain Singley momentarily, is a priority for the Spokane Police Department. We're constantly looking for innovative ways to balance the call load with the number of officers we have and also engage with the community as well. Again, the ultimate goal for the Spokane Police Department, and especially when we're talking downtown, is to make everybody feel safe. Increased visibility and community engagement is an important part of that strategy. Captain Singley has focused his staff, and his staff, as you've heard the mayor say, have done an amazing job downtown with the resources that they have. One of the issues that you'll hear from Captain Singley as well is we have seen a trend of groups of juveniles roaming in packs looking to prey on other people. This is something that he's been aware of for a while. He has focused his resources downtown on trying to prevent these juveniles from engaging in the very acts that we are here talking about today as well. Public safety is a community responsibility. We cannot do it alone. That means we all have a part to play in making Spokane a safer community. For parents and guardians, it's important for you to be sure that you know where your kids are. Who are your kids hanging out with? What are they doing? Do you know where they're at? One of the common denominators that we see when we're talking about people that prey on others is the home life is shattered. They come from broken homes, or they have parents or guardians that are uninvolved. We need to have those parents involved in every single aspect of their child's life, who they're hanging out with, who they're associating with, and where are they. We need mentors, we need teachers, we need coaches to be involved in expressing the values that we all want to live in a safe community. Again, it goes back to we need everybody to be involved. We can't do this alone. We need that community engagement. We also have to talk about, do we have a meaningful way of holding juveniles accountable? A lot of us, when we think of juveniles, we think of these young kids. The juveniles that we're talking about that are preying on other people are very sophisticated in what they're doing. I'll give you an example. I'm talking with one of the officers this morning. They are roaming the streets with pepper spray, with guns, with knives, with other weapons and other tools. And after they commit these acts, they're changing clothes. They're splitting up and going in different directions. So they're very intentional and deliberate in what they're doing. So we need to understand that the types of juveniles we're dealing with are predators, and they're preying on other people. And Captain Singley has done an outstanding job of focusing his resources on addressing those juveniles as well. So it is our goal to ensure that we protect the community and that we also give victims a voice. As you heard me say, we cannot do it alone. We need the community involvement at every single level. But we also appreciate those individuals and organizations that have come alongside the Spokane Police Department and partnered with us to make sure that we're creating a safe community that we all want to work in. So with that, I will turn it over to Captain Singley.
Thank you, Chief. So as the Chief said, we've certainly experienced an uptick in violent incidents downtown this year, and many of those have included or been perpetrated by large groups of teenagers or young adults, oftentimes with weapons, knives, guns, and resulted in some assaults with significant injuries. So there were several of them I wanted to highlight, but it's important to point out that although we do have some suspects outstanding on some of these incidents that we're still looking for, our officers have made arrests in every one of these violent encounters. So the first one occurred on March 29th, just outside the downtown library. We had a victim that was accosted by a large group of juveniles. During that assault, he was stabbed, he was pepper sprayed, he was punched and stomped on the ground repeatedly by a number of suspects. Our officers responded to the scene quickly. Suspects were gone. They proceeded to investigate, render first aid to that victim, but then continued their investigation, and over the next several days they were able to arrest 8 suspects who were involved in that incident. Their ages range from 16 to 24. They were charged with felony assault and felony criminal mischief, and there are still other suspects in that incident that they are trying to locate and arrest. On April 5th, we had an incident in Riverfront Park at the basketball courts where a victim was attacked by 3 teens. An altercation occurred. The 3 suspects, one brandished a knife, one brandished a gun. They wanted property from that victim. Victim tried to run away, was tackled to the ground, slashed with the knife. His property was taken. Our officers in that incident were subsequently able to locate and arrest one 15-year-old for first-degree robbery. On April 9th, we had another incident in the park where 12 juvenile suspects again attacked this victim. Again, they demanded property, which he refused. They ripped it from his arm. Multiple suspects then assaulted him, hitting, kicking, and again pepper spraying him. Our officers were able to arrest a 15-year-old female and a 22-year-old male for first-degree robbery in that incident. And then the final incident that I'll mention occurred just a couple days ago on the Monroe Street Bridge. We had 2 victims walking who were approached by 5 juveniles. They wanted to know if the 2 victims were in a gang. They proceeded to escalate into an assault where one victim, they tore his bag from his person. The other victim was stabbed. Our officers were able to catch up to that victim outside of the downtown library, render first aid. It was certainly a serious wound, but non-life-threatening. Our officers began to investigate and were able to quickly determine that these suspects were actually up at a north side address near Ash and Maxwell. They responded and were able to arrest 3 of these suspects that night for first-degree robbery and first-degree assault. One suspect was 14. 2 of the suspects were 16 years old, and there's one more suspect that they are currently still trying to locate and arrest. So again, I want to highlight that in each of these incidents, through the diligent work and follow-up by our officers, we have made arrests and are still looking for additional suspects. All of these incidents involve juveniles. There is certainly some association with these groups, and our analysts and investigators are continuing to look at that, but we do not believe right now that there is one singular group that is committing all of these incidents downtown. A number of these individuals have identified themselves as gang members, but at this point, that's not to say that they are necessarily gang-related crimes. We are continuing to work with our Regional Safe Streets Task Force, which focuses on violent crime and gang activity and drug distribution. So Riverfront Park, as we all know, is really kind of the centerpiece of downtown. And we at the Spokane Police Department it is our priority, and we want to let people know that it continues to be our priority for that to remain safe and inviting and accessible to everybody. And that will continue to be our focus going forward. And we also work with a number of partners like the park rangers in that same goal. The Parks and Rec rangers were instrumental in assisting on a number of these investigations that I referenced. The chief and the mayor both mentioned our department reorganization that took place in January. That has been instrumental in our crime-fighting efforts downtown, and it has also resulted in an increase in bike patrols and foot patrols downtown. And as we get into the warmer months and we have more visitors coming downtown for various events, you will see more of those patrols going forward. And more specifically about, kind of the effects of that reorganization and increased officer presence has been the vehicle prowling that the mayor referred to. So we pulled our stats for the first 3 months of this year compared to the first 3 months of 2022. And in January, our vehicle prowlings dropped to 71 compared to 110 last year. In February, we dropped to 46 from 142 in February of 2022. And then in March, we dropped to 34 compared to 114 in March 22. So that is a pretty significant decrease just in that particular crime area. Mayor?
Thank you, Captain Singley, and thank you, Chief Meidl. I just can't commend the department enough on the investigative work and the subsequent charges that come from that work. It takes a lot of time, but this is what amazes me, is how quickly they're able to resolve a lot of these cases. The progress is encouraging. We need to keep up the momentum. One of the important ways that we do this is by continuing to push for increased, tougher boundaries for drug-related offenses. So unfortunately, drug possession and use is a common theme that we see in the downtown core. We see it in our neighborhoods, and we see it all around the city. When there is violence in property crimes, chances are extremely high that there is also drug involvement. Chief Meidl and I, along with our colleagues around the state, have been extremely active with the state legislature, pushing for tougher boundaries for drug possession that mixes accountability and also treatment options. The bill that came out of the Senate, while it's not perfect, found some reasonable middle ground, but unfortunately, amendments added in the House have severely watered it down. What we need now is reasonable leadership that results in a drug possession law that pushes individuals to treatment and carries the certainty of jail time if failure to treatment happens. This is why I am working with my colleagues, mayors from around the state, on a letter to the state legislature urging them to retain the tougher boundaries in the Senate bill and leave room for local approaches to dealing with open drug use in public spaces. We all have an opportunity locally to make a difference with the solutions that meet the needs of our city here in Spokane. Officers regularly encounter drug use and are restricted by current laws from making and taking decisive action. Their inability under current law to do anything to address this issue is one of our greatest frustrations. That's why I have partnered with Council members Jonathan Bingle and Michael Cathcart on the Safe Open Spaces Ordinance that would make drug use illegal in Spokane, open drug use in public spaces. It establishes tougher boundaries with a mix of accountability and treatment opportunities, and also sets an expectation that public spaces are safe for everyone without the unwanted effects of smoke, residue, paraphernalia, and behaviors related to drug use. We have a drug emergency in this country, in our state, in our city, particularly with the emergence of fentanyl. Fentanyl and other substances not only continue to poison our communities, killing indiscriminately, wreaking havoc on the peace and order in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our region, but contributes to violence and our public safety in our city. Unfortunately, largely because of our size and our location, Spokane is a central hub for narcotics distribution throughout Washington, Idaho, and Montana. All too often, I hear from SPD about another significant seizure and arrest of someone in possession of thousands of fentanyl pills. And with bags and bags of pills, there are almost always guns. And that just creates another set of problems. So before we take any questions, I do want to leave you with a few data points. And they're quite alarming. The Spokane Fire Department administered Narcan, used to reduce the effects of opioid overdose, 18,013 times between 2015 and 2022. The frequency has grown to an average of at least once a day. That's just one agency. The number of confirmed opioid overdoses that the department responded to increased 60% in just the last couple of years, which it attributes to synthetic fentanyl that's now being added as a secondary substance. Fire departments and districts around our region are responding to the same type of overdose calls. Just ask the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. They will tell you that they have similar experiences taking fentanyl off the streets in Spokane Valley and even in the most rural areas of our county. Municipal police departments from Liberty Lake to Cheney are making the same finds and arrests. Here are the really staggering and sobering numbers. Fentanyl-related overdoses grew 186% from 2020 to 2021. And if that wasn't bad enough, consider this. Between 2017 and 2021, they are up more than 1,200%. During those same years, fentanyl seizures up 2,700% in Eastern Washington. That includes more than 1,000% from 2020 to 2021 just in Spokane County alone. That's why we are urgently working on all fronts to get a handle on this type of activity in our community. And that's the update we have for you today. There's a lot of encouraging news along with this, but we do have some time for a few questions if anybody has.
So when it comes to the arrests that you've made, congratulations on those, but you also did mention that there are still suspects in these cases that are outstanding. With that information in mind, some people might be worried when they come visit downtown. What would you say to those people who might feel scared or nervous hearing that there are still potential threats out there?
I'll let you guys take that one.
Yeah, so when you look at those incidents, the overwhelming majority of those have been identified, arrested. I think you heard Captain Singley say we do know who the others are. One of the nice things about the staff that Captain Singley has is they get to know the folks that frequent downtown, including a lot of the juveniles. So I would say that if they come downtown because we know who they are, I would anticipate they will be quickly arrested. And if they don't come downtown, I would assure them that we are looking for them, and at some point we will find them. So again, when you come downtown, downtown is a beautiful area. We encourage everyone to come downtown. We encourage them also to be safe, be aware of their surroundings as well. But in terms of these specific suspects, we're looking for them, and we know who they are. So if they do come down, it will be very little time until they're arrested.
Chief, will there be any sort of increased officer presence at the skate park in particular? I mean, we heard two instances referenced at the basketball courts and the skate park. And is there going to be any increased officer patrol or department patrol there?
Yeah, so we're actually in talks right now with Garrett Jones, the Parks Director, about increasing a presence of SPD in the park rangers at that park. So I would anticipate you will see that.
So are we seeing more nighttime activity and daytime activity, or is it all across the board?
I think it is all across the board, but both of the incidents that I referenced, I believe both of them took place in the evening. And our officers are aware of those problems in the park and there, and so they have definitely been more visible in that area.
I want to make sure I understood something correctly from earlier too, that although some of the incidents you talked about have similar contours, you don't believe that they are related or organized in any kind of way?
We do not believe that there's one organized group that is committing all these, but we do think there are some associated people involved in a number of the incidents.
And then to follow up on that, the mayor had mentioned this other element of increased drug use in the area. Do we think that has anything to do with the violent incidents we're talking about? Are these two separate things, or what might be the connective tissue there?
On these specific incidents, the four that I referenced, I am not aware of a specific connection to drug use or drug activity.
I have a question for the homeless people who are living downtown. I spoke to some of them yesterday, and they all shared that they feel like their living situation puts a target on their back when it comes to being a part of these crimes that are happening downtown. So we're here to protect all people. How are we protecting those who are also unsheltered in our community?
Absolutely the same as everybody else downtown. We don't tolerate anyone being victimized. So whether someone's homeless or they're an out-of-town visitor or, you name it, we are going to enforce the law the same regardless of who the suspects or victims are.
Well, and we're definitely taking measures to make sure that they are protected. Sleeping on the street is not safe. And as a compassionate community, that's not what we think is a display of compassion. So if we can get them indoors where it's much safer, especially in the overnight hours, when some of this crime occurs, that's the goal. Sleeping under underpasses, on the street and in fields is not compassionate. We have better options for people. And so if we can get them inside, in a warm bed, access to meals and services, that's the goal.
So in the meantime, while they are still using the streets as a place to sleep at night, how are you protected?
They're protected like everybody else is protected. Our officers downtown, doubling the patrols. I was with our officers a couple of weeks ago on one of their patrols on foot, and they're doing an exemplary job, and I hope you give them credit for that, because they are making an effort to reach out to people on the street, to connect them to services that meet their needs better than just a sidewalk does. And they're getting to know the individuals who frequent downtown and are making connections with them and building relationships to get them something better. So thanks for the question.
In like the 3 months since the patrol report, do you have any sense of any changes to both response times and overtime spending?
So yeah, when we look at the response times, it varies. So right now, when you look at the level of attrition that the Spokane Police Department is experiencing versus the level of and the number of officers we can hire, we are attriting more officers than we can hire. So again, when an officer retires, moves on, it takes about a year to fill that position. So right now, the Spokane Police Department has 21 vacancies today, but then you also have to look at the number of officers that are out injured, FMLA, family leave, and then we have 14 officers in training as well. So we're moving as quickly as we can to fill those vacancies while not lowering our standards. Really quickly, about 2 years ago, we would hire about one out of every 10 applicants that passed the process. We would offer a position to 1 out of every 10. If you fast forward to where we're at now in 2023 and you're looking at the types of folks that are applying, and we appreciate everyone who applied, we want people to apply. We need more people to apply. But right now, we're only hiring about 1 out of 20 people that apply. And the reason we're doing that is we're basing it on decision-making. We want to make sure that we're hiring the right people. We don't want officers that are going to go into a residence at 3 in the morning because someone from Florida is calling saying their house is burglarized and walking out with a TV. So the hiring challenges are very real for Spokane, and filling those vacancies are very real as well. And right now, we're having to maintain minimum staffing levels. So every single shift has a minimum staffing level, which in essence means we will not dip below this number for the safety of the community and for the safety of the officers. So we are having to call in more officers to fill those vacancies, and a lot of it does boil down to attrition and some of the officers that we have out injured or on family leave. So that's the first part. Do you have a second part to your question?
Second was overtime. If there have been any changes since the patrol report.
So not yet with the overtime. And again, I'm going to trace it back to just the amount of attrition we're seeing, the number of injured officers that go with that as well. So not quite seeing the impact that we would like to see on the overtime right now. But I will also say that our number one priority is providing safety to the community. And if that means we have to call in officers on overtime to maintain that minimum staffing, we're going to do that. We have a moral obligation to do that as well. So we're working to hire as quickly and as aggressively as we can. And hopefully at some point that's going to have an impact on that overtime number as well.
I have a question about community outreach. Is there any conversations with Spokane Public Schools or other school districts? Because obviously we've talked about how these are all connected with juveniles. Is there any conversations about whether increased patrols or presence is enough to prevent these going forward?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So by the time law enforcement becomes involved, it's too late, right? Someone already has done something wrong. So we only get called to a scene where something bad is happening or is about to happen. So I would say, realistically, when you're looking at it, it's something bad has happened by that time. So that goes back to what we spoke about earlier, is that intervention. It's family, it's guardians, it's teachers, it's coaches, it's neighbors, it's churches. So we are really absolutely need their involvement at every level. And when we're talking specifically about the juveniles that we've arrested or that have been involved, we're going to look to the family as well. Were you aware of where your son or daughter was? Or were you aware of who they're hanging out with, who they're associating with? Do you know where they're at? And are you also at times as a parent telling them, you can't go out, I'm not going to let you go out? I will tell you as a parent, I've had to tell my kids, there's certain people I would not let them hang out with because I didn't think that they were going to help my child make good decisions. And that's part of what parenting is. Sometimes you have to make decisions that are uncomfortable for your children, to have that accountability, to set those boundaries, and to make sure that they're making smart decisions. But we do need the schools on board, we need the families on board, we need churches on board. We have many, many organizations that are working with us right now. We appreciate their involvement, and we could just use more of it.
Is there any specific efforts to decrease recidivism amongst these kids? I mean, it's early, 14-year-old, that's young to get arrested, and obviously you don't want them to prevent. So how is that?
Yeah, so the 14-year-olds, a lot of the best way when you're talking about kids who are school age is going to be at the schools, right? They're in schools 9 months out of the year. That's the best time to connect with them, provide those services, the counseling, the intervention, good decision making. What we as an agency also acknowledge is that during the summer for almost 3 months, there's not a whole lot going on. So what we implemented about 8 years ago was the Police Activities League. And that is a program across the city at 3 different parks. We have 8 to 9 different activities. And for 5 to 6 weeks, we ask the school-age children, come and join the Spokane Police Department during our Police Activities League. You can drop your child off, they will be safe, and we're going to do a variety of activities. We give them a buffet of activities to choose from. And then we also teach them about values. And we try not to preach at them, but we also do try to tell them, values of teamwork, patience, good decision-making. So we're trying to fill that gap during the summer months. And we have partnerships with organizations like the MLK, some of the Youth for Christ, some of these other organizations. We do have those partnerships as well.
How unprecedented is the kind of recent uptick in like juvenile crime that you're describing? Like, have we seen like a similar number of incidents past with really young people? Like, is this really unusual?
So the question was, how prevalent is youth crime? Or
Sorry, how like unprecedented? Like, is this like, have we seen like a large number of crimes committed by young people like this in the past?
I don't have the exact numbers. We can certainly get those numbers. I will tell you anecdotally, it does feel like over the last several years, we've seen an intensity in the level of violence by juveniles now. And again, I'll point you out to some of the facts that were involved in these cases. Juveniles walking around with pepper spray, with knives, either walking around or associating with younger adults who have guns. One of the things that I know Captain Singley identified and really focused his team on last year as well was addressing these, and I'm just going to call them a pack of predators, these juveniles that are roaming around and looking to prey on people. So that's a trend that he spotted last year as well, and he told his team, we need to get this addressed as well. So anecdotally, it feels like there's a new level of violence coming from juveniles, and it's not unique to Spokane. I'm hearing it from other chiefs across the state as well. So that's one of the things where then we have to look at the, while we understand, and again, I think it was brought up as well, how do we stop them while they're young, or how do we divert them while they're young? And that's where it comes to, it can't just be government, it can't just be law enforcement. We have a role to play, but we have all these other organizations that we absolutely need to step up as well and become involved and insert themselves if their home life isn't where it should be. And we also need parents or guardians to make sure they're actually being parents or guardians as well. But back to your main question, I will tell you anecdotally, there is a feeling across the state that there is an increased level of intensity and the violence and the willingness to do violence that we're seeing from juveniles. And they're sophisticated. You heard me share earlier with you, these juveniles, after they're committing these robberies and these assaults, are switching clothes, changing clothes, breaking up and going into different directions. So these aren't just ad hoc juveniles. These are people who are being very deliberate and intentional in what they're doing.
Are they recommitting crimes?
The juveniles?
Yeah.
So what you heard Captain Singley say, there is at a minimum overlap between some of the people associated with these different groups. So at a minimum, some of them will be involved in multiple incidents, and others there will be some overlap. Not all of them are directly related, but some of the ones associated with one incident are associated with some of the other incidents, even if they're not directly involved, although some of them are directly involved as well.
And have all their victims been random for the most part? Or, I mean, can you say anything about like how, if there was any connection to any of these people who were victimized, do they
4 incidents that I mentioned are all described in the reports as, this unknown group of suspects kind of confronting them in the park or on the street or on the Monroe Street Bridge. So not associated.
Are there any hypotheses right now to tell us what is driving this increase? You've mentioned across the state, not just in Spokane. Anybody have any good theories as to why now and why that's happened?
So I will tell you, there's not one lever to this. There's not one layer. There are absolutely multiple layers. And again, I'll go back to something I'll say earlier. If you go to the Spokane County Jail right now and you look at the background of the majority of the people that are in there, the common denominator across all demographics is going to be broken family life. Either a single parent that wasn't at home, they're at work, or parents or family members that weren't involved, and that's where it starts. A lot of it also has to do with who do they associate with. There's a saying, bad company corrupts good character. So who are they associating with? And that's where the parents have an instrumental role of setting those boundaries for them. I think we are also experiencing an increase in mental health issues because of the COVID lockdowns. And I know, looking at some of the data I just researched earlier this year, 1 out of 5 people in the United States have some kind of mental health illness or some kind of mental health issue as well. So I don't think it's just unique to juveniles and minors, but I also think that as we get older, we develop more coping mechanisms. Everyone's heard they say males' brains aren't fully developed until they're 25. So the challenge is when they're younger, they don't have the same level of coping mechanisms and that same level of restraint that as an adult you would probably have, that you've just learned over the course of time. So it is multiple layers to this.
All right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Yeah, see you soon.